Hi, I'm Jake the NPC, and I'm about to tell you about the most messed up story about a pair of shoes I've ever heard in my entire life. So it starts back in the 1880s with this bank robber named George Parrott, otherwise known as Big Nose George, which, let me just say, if your nickname is Big Nose, I mean, you gotta have an impressive schnoz on you, and this man did. Oh my goodness gracious. For reasons we'll get into later, that's actually gonna be very funny and also very morbid. But Big Nose George was a small-time thief. He wasn't no Butch Cassidy, he wasn't a Sundance Kid, he was not a Billy the Kid. He wasn't any kind of kid. He was a low-time thief and cattle rustler, and he decided that he and his gang were going to try and up the ante and do something stupid, which is get ambitious, because that always leads to good things as a criminal. So he and his boys tried to rob a train, except there were two detectives. One was a deputy marshal or a deputy sheriff for Rawlins, Wyoming, and then another one was an actual detective for the United Pacific Railway System, which the fact that railway systems had their own police forces back then is kind of mind-boggling, but I digress. You just find it like, what are you? I'm a detective in the police force. And like, well, what police force? Oh, the Union Pacific train station. I mean, that's just weird. But Big Nose George and his gang dropped on both of these guys as they were waiting outside of the train tracks, and they murdered both of them horribly. Then they robbed the train, but it wasn't long until the bodies were discovered, and that brought their crimes up from simple robbery to full-scale murder, and a $20,000 bounty was placed on their head, which current Jacob does not know what that price is in modern money, but he's going to put it right here, and it's probably going to be some stupid price, because oh my god, wow, look at that. Okay, that being said, Big Nose George probably would have gotten away with it very, very easily. But he decided to be stupid, and he went to Montana with his gang, where they got sloppy drunk and started bragging about the train robbery, which, obviously, if you're going to brag about your crimes when there's a $20,000 bounty on your head, everyone's going to look at you like their next meal card. So they literally grabbed him, put him back on a cart, and sent him back to Rawlins, Wyoming to stand trial. He did stand trial, and he was sentenced to hang. Unfortunately, he decided to be even more stupid, and when he went to jail that night, he thought he would try to escape. So he hit his guard in the head with his chains, thinking that would knock him out. It didn't. I know they're chains, but like, come on, dude. When they got into a scuffle, this is where the real OG moment comes in here. The guard's wife heard her husband's cries for help. She came in there with a gun, saw what was happening, and then forced George back into the cell like, you stay in there. You stay right in there. I don't know why she's Australian, but yeah. Already, George has made mistake after mistake, and he just made probably the worst one, because now comes the Quit spying on me, you robot! Anyway, he made the worst mistake he could possibly make in this moment, because as he did this, he also caused a bit of outrage by being a total awful person. And this inspired other people to also be awful. So instead of letting him meet his assigned hanging date, they did the demonetizable, very, very bannable word that begins with an L, it's the exact one you're thinking of, to him on a telephone pole. And it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. He was trying to cling to it, and apparently he also lost both of his ears from the rope burns. Like, just literally. So he went from Big Nose to now Big Nose and Earless George. So, really, really bad thing. That's how he met his end. But that's not where his story ends, and that's actually not why he's famous, because he wasn't that well known, and even though that is awful, it's sadly not a big standout. What happens after his death with his body is well, some of you are already putting two and two together, but let's not spoil it. Two doctors, one was named Thomas McGee and the other one was named John Osborne. They wanted to study his body, so they kind of stole it. They were in charge of the autopsy, so it wasn't like, they took it out of the grave, but like, they had already nailed the coffin shut on this man. And just a fun fact about the big nose thing that I told you I'd talk about later, his nose was literally so big that it was interfering with the coffin actually being closed on his face, and they had to physically nail it shut, which means these two doctors had to pry the coffin open and then start performing brain autopsy on him. You see, Thomas McGee had a wife who was criminally insane, and there was this kind of pseudoscientific belief that the criminal brain, not just like those who are criminally insane, or there were physical abnormalities that could be observed in the brain that he was hoping to observe in George that would, maybe lead him to come up with a cure for his wife. That didn't happen. And then John Osborne's purposes for doing this would not, he was, okay. This is where this comes into. So John Osborne was on a train, allegedly, okay, going to a party. And when Big Nose George held up that train, he kind of caused John to be late, and John took that personally. very personally, actually, because his first thought was, well, I have George Parrott here. Let me just, take off some skin from places. Guys, he made them into shoes. I know you've already put it together, but he took the stuff from here, and here. I hope that's the innocent as I can be with that. He took that and he sent it to a tannery where they processed the leather, and then he had it made into a medicine bag and shoes. And I wish I could say it stopped there, that he got his comeuppance, but no, it only gets worse. He had a 16-year-old assistant, and she went on to be, I forget her name, I'll put it right here. She went on to be the first female physician in Wyoming. He gifted her George's skull cap. Like, he cut, because they had to cut it open to get the brain. He gave the cap to her. He cleaned it off and was like, here you go. And she had that until she was like 90 years old. Like, no one put two and two together. It didn't get better from there because she used it as a doorstop, according to one of Osborne's letters, for a while. And then by her own admission, her husband used it as an ashtray. So, wow. Okay. That's pretty awful. John Osborne and Thomas McGee then put George Big Nose's body into a barrel of whiskey where it remained for quite a few decades. It wouldn't be discovered until the 50s when they just opened it up and saw a skull missing its top, and they were like, what on earth happened here? And then they went and they asked the female physician about it, and they were like, oh yeah, I have that guy's skull cap. And they were like, oh crap, and it's currently in a museum. So that's really, really fun. I wish I could say that, John Osborne, was punished for, body mutilation and several other, crimes against humanity, because that's I cannot name another person who has made a human being into shoes and been proud about it, because, like I said, he was a messed up guy. He wasn't just a doctor, though. He was actually Wyoming's first Democrat governor. So this man was a governor of a state, and he wore the shoes to his inauguration. And he had those shoes for most of his life. In fact, he was appointed, get this is the fun part, he was appointed in 1914 by Woodrow Wilson to be the Assistant Secretary of the State. So another person who I'm not very fond of for reasons everyone already knows. I will say this, to Wilson's credit. Never made a man into shoes. I mean, that's a pretty, I mean, as far as things go, that's pretty, that's the bare minimum, but oh my gosh, this was a U.S. politician, and he never faced any kind of punishment for this. The man I wouldn't say he capitalized, he did literally make capital off of another person, but he actually, and I really do mean this, he kept the shoes with him for, I think until his death, and from there, the shoes made their way back to Wyoming, where they are currently in a museum. You can still visit them today. They look disgusting, and I just imagine being a criminal. And if someone, if my buddy had a tattoo, right? And then I were to see that tattoo on somebody's toe after I know the guy went missing, I would absolutely flip my lid. I don't know how anyone was calm about this. The fact that he wore them to his inauguration. Who are you wearing? Oh, I'm wearing George Parrott. What are you doing, man? And then the lady with the skull cap using oh my gosh, the ashtray. Yeah, it was a gross one today. That is probably one of the most evil things I've ever heard a human being do with another. So, yeah, I hope you had a good day. I hope I didn't ruin it too badly, but yeah, I gotta go to church now. Bye.